there's all these stories about, guys over in Macedonia who are running these fake news sites.
Number 24 is Content Farms in Macedonia.
Бидејќи ако се направи грешка, таа ќе биде кобна. Нема враќање назад.
So Europe need to remain more sexy lady in the world. Ajde, majkата!
Господа ја чува Македонија и низините граѓани.
Presidential and parliamentary election dates for Macedonia have now been set, and the parties and candidates are gearing up for campaigns that will determine the direction of Macedonia for years to come. On the ethnic Albanian side, there is anger, accusations, and counter-accusations, as Dewey looks to perhaps field their own candidate instead of joining their junior partner in government, SDSM, which is still not decided on its candidate, while the ethnic Albanian opposition will be fielding Arben Taravari. On the VMRO side, they'll be deciding their candidate by March 2. In the meantime, hundreds of thousands of Macedonians are literally stuck in Macedonia, or in whatever country they happen to be in if they are holding a passport which says Republic of Macedonia. Who is to blame? Will there be consequences? And the media outlet Politico Europe has an in-depth and interesting piece on American graft and the revolving door between the U.S. State Department and large American corporations like Bechtel. We'll discuss all this and more on this episode of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. I'm Jason Miko, coming to you from the foot of the Catalina Mountains in Oro Valley, Arizona.
And this is Cvetin stuck in Skopje, Macedonia.
Do you have a quote-unquote new passport with the quote-unquote correct name?
No, I do not. I actually sped up the issuing of my old passport. In 2019, I applied for a Republic of Macedonia passport, 4 months before the government said they're going to start issuing passports with North Macedonia, the stupid name, the fake name. And I wanted to keep my Macedonian passport for as long as possible.
Of course, yes.
So I got a new one, and it's valid until 2029.
Not anymore.
Yeah, and then it turned out that they were not able to begin issuing the North Macedonia passports for good 2 years, I think, after, or at least a year and a half after I quickly, rushed to get the one with the proper name. So they've been issuing Republic of Macedonia passports until early 2021. And yeah, I don't have one, and I applied because obviously you got to travel. You need to have one. Like it's not.
Sure.
It's a matter of safety, security, and normal living here. It's not like we're in the United States. You can live your entire life in the same country without missing out on much. So we had, after a lot of phone calls, I applied for an emergency passport, and they would give me like a date in November. Then I was somehow able to get a normal date in January. The emergency passports are more expensive. So I forgo the date in November, and I stuck to early
November
January.
and January of what year?
No, this is just to get, you go there, they take your picture and your details. So it was problematic just to begin the procedure, just to go to a large, the Macedonian television building has a site for these things. And they take your picture, they take your details, all of which they already have. They have a relatively recent picture of me taken in 2019, which was supposed to be valid until 29. So they could have just printed passports for everybody without asking us, right? No need to reapply because I applied once already. So even getting the term to go to this building and an appointment to have your picture taken, it took a lot of phone calls, a lot of tension. So this happened now in early January, and by law they're supposed to print out the passport in, I think, 2 weeks or something like that. And it's now like a month and more since then, and there's no chance that they'll get it done. They only had, we have now the numbers, we have like 600 and some thousand people have applied, so it means they don't have passports. Some of them are in the diaspora, some of them are across Macedonia, but most are concentrated in Skopje, where we had these very long lines because so many people live in Skopje and there were only 2 points where you can have your picture taken. So 650,000 people are applying, and Oliver Spasovski, the former interior minister, he acknowledged 2 days ago that when he left office, he only left 50,000 blank passports. So that's the chokehold now. We have, we do not have enough blank passports, and the company, a German company which prints them out, says, listen, we are booked with other stuff. We cannot just drop everything and print you hundreds of thousands of new ones. We have a printing house in Macedonia which can print 70,000 a month. So even if we get all the passports we need tomorrow, it will still take a year to print them out. I'm not sure if they can speed this up. And the new minister from VMRO, Tukovsky, he said that, speaking a few days before Spasovsky, he said that he only has like 5,000 passports in Macedonian and 10,000 in Albanian. So they burned through this small cache of 50,000 in like a matter of days. And yeah, so we're now, we're really royally screwed. They're now issuing passports by priority. You have to say you have like emergency issue. I mean, people that actually have emergency issues, I guess they can get somehow to the police. But it's a drama. I went once to ask, like, hey, is there any chance of my passport showing up? And, you know, people are crying, people are angry, they have family abroad. It's a huge mess. It's a bloody mess.
And just by way of quick background, so for some of our listeners that may not be fully aware of this, that have their own passports, especially for those that live abroad and have dual citizenship, this is a result of the quote-unquote so-called Prespa agreement 5 years after it was signed, which was this month. We are recording this on Sunday, February 18. I think the 5-year anniversary was last week. But according to the so-called Prespa agreement, it was 5 years for the adoption of these new passports with the so-called quote-unquote new name using the N-word. And obviously, the government this whole time, starting with, I mean, they're the ones that engineered this whole fraud of the name change, etc. And they've had 5 years to prepare, and they didn't do enough or anything to prepare for it, and not only in terms of just printing enough physical documents, but in terms of informing the public and encouraging and everything else. So, and I get it. We all hate the N-word, but you know, from a practical standpoint, you know, you have to use it. You're gonna have to get passports that have the N-word on it. Okay. Doesn't mean you have to like it, and it doesn't mean it can't be changed in the future. But anyway, that's for another time. And so here we are, and of course, now the question is, to my question in the monologue, Oliver Spasovsky and the government is to blame, of course. Will there be any consequences for him? He wants, he wants to run for president on the Citizens side. Not anymore. Okay, so he is no longer in the running. So, but still, there should be, you know, consequences in terms of civil or criminal proceedings against him at some point. What are the odds?
They're not apologizing. They're refusing to say I'm sorry, both Spasovsky and Kovacevsky, which is hurting them even more because, you know, it won't help them much, but it might soften the blow. They're trying to do these kinds of stupid PR tricks, like Kovacevsky most recently started. Well, so VMRO is at fault because they kept saying that they will change the name, so maybe people were fooled by them. So why now that they have a technically appointed interior minister, why they don't refuse to, you know, start issuing, I don't know what he's trying to say. Why don't they rip out the prescription of having like two ministers technically appointed in a short-term government? Mickovsky doesn't have a passport. He said so. So Kovacevsky is like, why is he applying for a passport with North Macedonia? Why is he taking up the space for a loyal citizen, basically, who respects the name North Macedonia? Why is the opposition leader, who will be prime minister soon, asking to have a passport issued? This is what the prime minister said today. They're trying to do this like peasant level, like we call it peasant. I don't know what would be like a hick style jokes and cheap tricks for the public, which are just making people angrier at them because it's really, really idiotic. Spasovsky was trying to throw a lot of legalistic jargon in an hour-long interview in which he was strongly challenged. The journalist was beside himself, even though the journalist is actually SDSM, but he's from Shekerinska's wing of the party. So, yeah, Spasovsky is now toast in terms of his presidential ambitions. He was seriously trying. He had a bunch of people on the social media praising him. Like he invented for himself like a hashtag nickname El Ministro, like the Spanish Mexican version, like of a crime-fighting minister. That's now all a joke. And Shekerinska is pretty obviously running. Kovacevsky confirmed this. He said that they're having the candidacies of Pendarovsky, of course, and he kind of praised him. He said he's okay, but he said there are others. They're going through their local branches of the party, and he said a former party leader is running, and this leaves, okay, this could be Zaev or Shekerinska, but we're assuming it's Shekerinska.
Shekerinska. She's been on the kind of a PR charm offensive, getting back into the media lately, whereas Zaev is faded.
Which is interesting for a person with zero charm to be on a charm offensive. But she's trying, bless her.
Exactly.
Yeah. Doing her best. Zaev is quiet. Zaev might be a candidate for the general elections in his district, in the southeast district, but he will lose badly, and we'll see how that works. And they have Fatmir Bitici, so the whole, so whatever Albanian they have in the party, they no longer have Muhammad Zakiri, who was supposed to be the Albanian leader of SDSM, after Dui put him in prison. They have this idiot advisor for Zaev and Kovacevsky, Idbonda Demi or something. He's not too low profile, too crazy to be nominated. So they settled on an Albanian who they appointed Deputy Prime Minister for Economical Issues, Fatmir Bitici. So they might try to nominate him. Because they're desperate to get Dui to support them in the first round. So we have elections on, the dates, the 22nd, I think, or 24th was the first round.
24th, I believe. Yeah.
I think, presidential elections. And the plan was for SDSM to run their presidential candidate, to have a firm agreement for coalition with Dui by then. Dui votes for this presidential candidate, and they defeat the VMRO candidate in the first round. And they say, look, with the help of the Albanian voters, they were hoping that the Alliance of Albanians will join them in this, the largest opposition Albanian party. And they thought, there will be no serious Albanian challenger, will win the first round of the presidential elections. There's going to be a mess in VMRO. They'll be disappointed. They've seen polls that they're winning. This is going to deflate them a lot. And then this will spill over into the general elections 2 weeks later. And whoever wins the presidential race, no matter, it's important for us to deflate VMRO before the general elections, the parliamentary elections, to reduce our margin of defeat, and then maybe play with the other Albanian parties to deny VMRO a victory.
Right.
But Kurti, the prime minister of Kosovo, gathered all the Albanian opposition leaders. He set them together. They decided to nominate the Alliance of Albanians leader Taravari as president. This brought this significant party into the opposition fold. Dui panicked because they know that if they go into elections and they're supporting Pendarovsky, for example, and the Albanian opposition is running a notable ethnic Albanian for president, that a lot of the DUI voters who are Albanians and kind nationalist, of course, that they're going to vote for the Albanian, which is being offered, for Taravari. So instead of deflating VMRO, it would be DUI that would be deflated in the first round of presidential elections when Taravari wins 120,000 votes, for example, the bulk of the Albanian votes. And Pendarovski, the SDSM DUI candidate, loses to the VMRO candidate. So they panicked, and they said we cannot allow the Albanian opposition to steal our thunder. They said we'll nominate our own guy, we'll nominate Bujar Osmani. Then they said no, they're currently pretty loudly announcing that they will nominate Ali Ahmeti himself for president. Mm-hmm. So they're going all in, hoping that Ahmeti still has enough star, name recognition that most of the Albanians will support him, will be bribed. There might be ballot stuffing and all sorts of other developments. And but this now means that SDSM are going to be destroyed in the first round of the presidential elections. An SDSM candidate running without Albanian backup against a VMRO candidate is going to lose 2-1. It's going to be a bloodbath.
Yeah. Right. No matter who the VMRO candidate is.
VMRO have their issues. It's not.
Yeah. It's not all roses and puppy dogs.
They don't have they're doing well in the general elections, but in the presidential elections, I have no idea what they're doing. But whoever will destroy, even VMRO could do some tactical voting. They could have like 20,000 VMRO people vote for Taravari against Ahmeti, and they could still defeat the SDSM candidate and Ahmeti in the first round. They could do like a major upset in the elections. This could be, this is what I would do. This would be I might actually, vote Taravari, even without anybody like telling me we're going tactical. I might do it myself. So now SDSM are still begging for a DUI to support them. So one of their offers is, okay, we will nominate an ethnic Albanian. We will nominate Fatmir Bitici, nobody knows him, zero charisma, zero star power, but at least he's an Albanian. Mm-hmm. So it is our party doing the nominating. We're still the larger party in the coalition, but you, DUI, can say that we are voting for an ethnic Albanian dude, and maybe this will be enough for your voters. So this is an attempt for SDSM to save the only chance that they might salvage something from the elections, which is a coalition with the Albanian, with DUI before the elections.
But how many citizen voters, or citizen adjacent voters, to borrow a word from today, pop culture, how many of them would actually, once they get into the voting booth, vote for an ethnic Albanian as Macedonians? I mean, would they really do that? Would they put loyalty to the party first?
So they, for Bitici, if they're told like this is because he lived in downtown Skopje, he's like not an Albanian, they might tell their voters. The problem will be if they get to if they form a coalition, the main ticket will be the presidential elections would just be like the impetus in the first round, who gets a boost in the first round.
Right. Yeah.
But the important thing is the general elections, and when they see the lists with Albanians, so this will be Skopje, this will be Kumanova, this will be Ohrid, Bitola, not to mention obviously Tetovo, Gostivar. For Macedonians in all these cities, they will see, for SDSM voters, they will see ethnic Albanians on their list for presidential candidates. And these are going to be, so if Bitici is like, economist, like technocrat, nothing major, but these are going to include some actual terrorists, some commanders from the civil war, like actual Albanian nationalists. This is going to be really ugly for Macedonian voters.
Right. So I don't know if that strategy would work for Citizen to choose an ethnic Albanian, and then so it seems. Quick aside here, I see Hans just tweeted out for a few minutes ago saying that Sela held a different Congress for the Alliance of Albanians, dismissed Taravari, and had himself appointed as the Alliance leader. Was that just
of course,
today?
of course.
Was that today or
Yeah.
yesterday?
Yeah,
Okay.
this is, I think, today. So when Taravari declared for the opposition, immediately because Dewey previously bribed Taravari, they bought him 2 houses in downtown Skopje for him and his
Because
best
it wasn't
friend.
enough.
Yeah, and they gave them to them, the houses, and
Right.
they joined the coalition.
Yeah.
So now, when he eventually decided that his party is dissipating in the government, they're losing their opposition cred, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they decided. We said we're going back to the opposition because we're losing our purpose for existence. Other opposition parties will take all our voters.
Mm-hmm.
So they immediately, Dewey and SDSM immediately bribed the former leader of this party, Cvetin Sela, to challenge, to try to take over the party from Taravari. And he's doing this now. They're both organizing separate conventions of the party. One is removing the other from the party. The ministers split in half. The members of parliament, I think they're more toward Sela, toward the pro-government option. But yeah, the voters will probably trend more towards Taravari because they're opposition voters. The party was built to challenge Dewey, not to be consumed by Dewey.
Right. Okay. So again, elections are on the 24th. First round of presidential elections on the 24th, second round on May 8th. Those are both Wednesdays, which is a novel thing for Macedonia. So a novel thing for Europe. Europe tends to vote almost exclusively on Sundays, I believe, whereas we Americans vote on Tuesdays, oddly. I'm not sure what the history between what that is. But anyway, and the reason for that, of course, is that when Sunday, May 5, which is when another date that had been thrown around, of course, is Easter. So at least the Albanians didn't insist and force that, and the Americans didn't force them to have elections on Easter Sunday. So, so the 24th, first round, then May 1st is a Wednesday, and then May 8th is the second round of presidential and the parliamentary elections. VMRO's got to choose here. Again, this is the 18th of February, so in 2 weeks, VMRO's going to choose their candidate. It's interesting. Now, I wonder if that would play into Citizen is going to choose their candidate later in the month of March. So VMRO is going to come out first with theirs, and that will affect, I'm assuming, how Citizen and or Dewey choose theirs. And on the VMRO, just quickly on the VMRO side, Gordana is thinking of running again.
Yeah.
The candidate from last time. Who else?
She was the candidate for the last time. She's like a law professor who was usually seen as more close to SDSM, to urban voters. So it was like a message from VMRO that they're not running like a proper VMRO candidate, but a peace offering to the urban people of Skopje to secede from SDSM and join with VMRO. It kind of worked. It took a huge effort from SDSM to get all the Albanian parties to support Pendarovski. Pendarovski obviously lost the first round of the presidential elections to Gordana, and only won after they had every single Albanian party support him in the second round. If the Albanian voters are now divided, she could win. She's not very again, charismatic or too interesting for the VMRO voters. They have an equally bland, I would say, candidate, another law professor from the same faculty, Alexander Spasinovsky, young guy, early 40s. He was seen like a political advisor, polling advisor to Gruevski back in the day, and then he kind of withdrew himself from politics for a very long time. He hasn't been seen in politics for a very, very long time. Some are saying Antonio might run, Antonio Miloševski, former foreign minister. He would bring some diplomatic, which is badly needed, some diplomatic background to VMRO.
Yes.
Vlatko might try to run again, Vladimir Đurčev, who would bring like American, knowledge of American foreign policy in case Trump wins in November. So he would be like, okay, we are trumping things up here a little bit. The usual presidential candidates are Saško Kedev and his wife Ganka Cvetanova, who are Saško was presidential candidate after Boris died in the 2004 elections, defeated by Branko Crvenkovski with tremendous ballot stuffing in the Albanian districts. But also Ganka is also seen as a popular former culture minister. She's also, both of them are seen as potential presidential candidates.
So it's a potentially really crowded field there. Interesting. By the way, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this. So again, 18th of February. So a week from tomorrow is the 26th of February, and that's the 20th anniversary of Boris's passing, along with 8 of his colleagues over the mountains in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So it's hard to believe it's been 20 years, 2 decades. It's just kind of wow. So, anyway. Okay, well, I think by the time we do this podcast again, probably early March. Actually, March 2 is the VMRO. That might be our next podcast. Is the day after that, and we'll know what's going on. But let's as I highlighted in the monologue, 3 things we want to talk about: the passports, the elections, and then the graft and the revolving door that is the United States Department of State and other folks in the U.S. Governmental system. So this article in Politico Europe came out last week, and the title is "How the U.S. Broke Kosovo and What That Means for Ukraine." Okay, Matthew Kartniching is the author. He's actually, oddly, a fellow Arizonan. So his I think his mother is. His father's Austrian, his mother's American, but he grew up in Phoenix, just up the road from me here. But anyway. And
probably more importantly, his brother is the former chief of staff for Johannes Hahn.
Johannes Balkan Tactics Hahn.
Exactly, yes. We have to use his proper full name.
Proper title. Yes, exactly, right. If they're going to use the N-word, I'm going to use his middle name. So, But let me just read the opening lines of this, because this is great. Quote, George W. Bush's little brother was confused. So, you are Albanian, Neil Bush asked Kosovo's former ambassador to Washington, Vlora Čikaku, over dinner at Pristina's finest hotel last July. Yes, she told the former American president's sibling, who had just arrived a few hours earlier in a chauffeur-driven black Range Rover from neighboring Macedonia. But if you're all Albanian, why is your country called Kosovo? Bush replied, incredulous. He was surprised to learn that his brother is considered a hero in Kosovo for championing its independence as president in 2008. So it goes on. So Neil Bush was there along part of a group with General Wesley Clark, looking at investing in the country's energy sector. It's a very long article. We should put this article in the show notes. I think highly recommend it. It'll take you 20-25 minutes to read it, but it's well, aside from Matthew's brother being the former Johannes Balkan Tactics Hahn chief of staff, it's a very good outline of how and it goes into so Clark, Albright, James O'Brien, who used to work for Albright, was but now is back in the State Department. It's this continuing revolving door of American officials that have worked the region or other countries and then leave the State Department or other parts of government that they're working for and then go to work for Bechtel, Halliburton, all of these different companies. And the article is also about, is this good for those countries? I mean, they go in there, they go into debt, they spend hundreds of millions, billions of euros on major, and this is mostly major infrastructure projects or energy. And then, is it good for the country? And I think his answer is no. So.
Yeah, it's really incredible what they wrote. So, to the main point, I mean, we had the U.S. take over Kosovo in '99. With it, as they would say when.
Sorry. And I'm scrolling through as you're talking, and it's interesting because not only is this the 20th anniversary of Boris's passing, but March is the 25th anniversary of the very defensive bombing by NATO of Yugoslavia. So, Serbia. So 25 years. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, we with this as the older, not the older Bush, the Neil Bush's brother, George W. Bush. He would say, when you bomb it, you own it. You break it, you own it, right? When he attacked Iraq, this was what was said. So when the U.S. attacked Yugoslavia, attacked Serbia, took over Kosovo, they now own it, and this was supposed to be like the model for Western. So basically, they took out a territory, they made it a state in the image of Hillary Clinton, Madeleine Albright, Wesley Clark, the Bushes now apparently. And this was supposed to be the model for all of us, what we can expect to see if we join the West. And now that the West is fighting for hearts and minds, especially of us Eastern Orthodox, Slavic, semi-Russians, I guess, and George W. Bush's and Neil Bush's and Jeb Bush's and all the Bush's eyes, we are obviously semi-Russian people. They're fighting for our hearts and minds, I guess. And if they could deliver a prosperous, rich Kosovo, Bosnia, the territories which are directly controlled. Bosnia obviously has a direct international administrator appointed by the EU and the US. These countries should have been far more successful than Serbia, for example, if Serbia is still on the fence. If in Macedonia, the Macedonian people are obviously now turning away from the West, shocked after all the blackmail and everything we went through. But if we see that Kosovo is bristling with foreign investments, infrastructure, employment, etc., we would say, okay, maybe the West has a point. Maybe a Balkan country can turn into... We see Slovakia, we see Poland, we see maybe even Romania, but by this point, even parts of Bulgaria look pretty decent now when we go visit. But we do not see this replicated in the Western Balkans, and we didn't really get much for our own affiliation with the West. In the case of Macedonia, for slavishly following the Western commands in these past 7 years, all we get is this type of infrastructure deals. So, like the one described in this article, it's not funded by an American bank or, the European Union should be funding this by all right, as it is funding projects in Bulgaria, in Greece, and wherever. It contains stupendous amounts of corruption in the contract. The article explains how the then American ambassador to Kosovo, Christopher Dell, who lobbied obviously for this deal, just as Ambassador Ageler is now lobbying for the Bechtel deal in Macedonia. Dell was later appointed director for Bechtel for Mozambique, or I guess the whole of Southeast Africa was. I remember when it was first reported, it was said he practically governs the whole of Southeast Africa for the company. So the price is several times higher than in the similar by in terms of difficulty the offers we would get from Chinese companies to build us highways. The Chinese would offer to fund it through their own companies, and then it would be a lower interest rate than what we're paying now at these global interest rates. We are now going to pay $1.3 billion to Bechtel for highways, without counting the land, the purchase of the land along the route. And the route goes through Albanian districts, and DUI is negotiating the deal. So you can imagine they're practically buying the land from their cousins. In the name of government officials, they go to their relatives in Kichov, and they're buying their land. We will be paying like 50 euros per square meter. We'll see some crazy prices now for farmland, like ridiculous. So the level of corruption is going to be tremendous. Mm-hmm. Serbia is building a highway with Bechtel to try to get some U.S., so that it's not seen as the pariah by the U.S., to buy some influence, obviously, in the U.S. State Department. Mm-hmm. But when they're negotiating this deal, they actually get 0.something% loan interest, practically zero interest loan, effectively. Mm-hmm. So the bad boy in the region is getting a relatively sweetheart deal, and Kosovo, Macedonia, the good guys in the region, at the moment, we're getting the worst deal imaginable.
Right.
And, we pay the first tranche to Bechtel, and the next day Ali Ahmeti purchases a business center in downtown Skopje. Mm-hmm. It's ridiculous. It's all hugely corrupt.
Yeah. As you were mentioning that's a good summation there. Philip Rieker, former U.S. ambassador to Macedonia. Let me read you just a bit of his bio from the Albright Stonebridge Group.
Oh, yeah.
Ambassador, retired, Philip T. Rieker is partner and lead of the Europe and Eurasia practice at DGA ASG, that's the Albright Group, where he draws on 30 years of diplomatic experience to support clients with interests across the region. Incredible.
Yeah, they're rotating, they're switching places. So Jim O'Brien is in the Albright Group. Rieker is acting assistant secretary for Europe and Eurasia under Trump, of all presidents.
Yeah.
And then they switch places. Then Rieker goes into this Albanian lobbying organization to cash in on his services for delivering Macedonia to the Albanian national interests. Mm-hmm. And O'Brien goes from the Albright Group, directly working for the Albanian lobby. He goes into the position that Rieker held as Assistant Secretary for Europe and Eurasia, and he immediately comes in to Macedonia and berates us, tells the Albanian parties to stick together. Mm-hmm. He openly asked them not to form an opposition bloc to DUI, which is negotiating the Bechtel deal with this U.S. company, which is linked to the State Department. Mm-hmm. They're all linked through Yale. They're all, Jess Bailey was there. Pressman, this is the Yale gang now. Pressman in Hungary, also Albright acolyte, who's now trying to create a colored revolution in Hungary over the Navalny death most recently. He is part of this group. So, And Politico says actually that the amounts are, so practically Kosovo just became a country, and because of this deal, they're already saddled with so much debt, like it's affecting all other investments, and they're already immediately they're starting their life as a seriously indebted country.
Yeah, and from a technical standpoint, they're not actually. I mean, from the UN definition, they're not actually a country because they're not recognized by the UN as a country. So they're not even a country, and yet they're saddled with debt. I have to read some more from this article because it's just too funny. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So, okay, so it says, Clark, and this is General Wesley Clark. Clark began with a whirlwind history of Kosovo for Bush, who appeared slightly dazed. It's an amazing story of people who just want freedom, the general said. Bush wanted to know how they became Muslims. Well, people are just people, Clark told him. If you wanted to be educated under Ottoman rule, you had to be a Muslims. What about the Serbs?
Yeah,
Clark
that was
said,
the reason why they changed religion.
The
education.
Clark says, Serbs are notorious for not being loyal to one another, Clark continued. At NATO, I had 3 enemies, Serbs, wishy-washy Europeans, and the Pentagon. Everyone laughed. And then it goes on, and this is the clincher part of the article. And it mentions Velnev, who's a Bulgarian involved in this as well. It says, Clark, Bush, and Velnev did not respond to requests for comments. Of course not. So, yeah, it is just...
Yeah, I can imagine this going like the Tucker-Putin interview. So imagine George Bush there. How can I leverage my name recognition into contracts in Macedonia and Kosovo? And just asks, okay, but just let me get the basic lay of the land. You're Muslims. We are kind of like, aren't we at war with the Muslims?
Yeah.
And Clark starts, okay, let me give you just let me take 30 seconds to explain this to you, and then 3 hours later, like, and then the Serbian knight Miloš Obilić, he killed the Ottoman, and Bush is like, oh, eyes glazed over.
Exactly. Yeah. So, actually, and sometimes I like what he says. Sometimes it doesn't. John Kirby, who is currently, I think, the national security spokesman or something in the White House, he's notorious for going between the government and CNN and literally back and forth like a ping pong. It's just kind of credible. And you mentioned that Rieker worked, the State Department under Trump, proving that it doesn't matter who the president is, Republican or Democrat. It doesn't matter. Yeah. The State Department, especially, is an institution unto itself, and they'll do whatever the bloody hell they want. So, especially once they're out, because then they get rich. We still need to do a little more research, I think, into Jess Bailey and Kate Burns and some of these others to see where Paul Waller, see where they are these days, and if they're working for. And who's the one I really hate, Larry Butler. See where they are these days. So, Mike Einig, I believe. I talked to some friends last time I was in Macedonia who were close to Mike, and he apparently divorced. Sarah Einig was his wife when he was their ambassador. They got divorced, and he went off. He's in Paris, I believe, and started a new family at whatever late age he's in, and probably just doing consulting. So, we should say not everybody that works for the State Department, goes and then works for lobby groups and American corporations. But it seems that the really nasty ones do, and Phil is one of the really nasty ones, I think. So Wes Clark as well. So anyway, it's a good article. We'll put in the link, and we'll keep talking about it from time to time, just because it's so much fun.
Yeah, but also another interesting element here is, as you said, like the author of the article is the brother of a high-level EU official, and we began to hear like EU officials, like the Dutch ambassador to Macedonia. The EU formally treats formal ambassador and spokespeople for the Commission. They said that Macedonia's deal with Bechtel is not, and obviously it's not above board, because it was like an exclusive contract given exclusively to one company. Yeah, and you can feel that like the Johannes Hans gang, they would prefer if this is built with EU grants.
True.
Because that way they will get a say in who wins these grants and how the money is spent. It's crazy. Gruevski, at the height of his arguments with his disputes with the EU and the US, he was able to secure like half of the funding for the Demirkapia-Gevgelija highway. Very difficult highway, like very serious. Going through a mountain gorge, through the Demirkapia Gorge. And he got half of the funding, or more even, from the EU. And then he went and named the highway Alexander the Great, to say that, to show that this will not change his mind, that Macedonia will not be bought with a few $100 million for infrastructure that the EU should be building in the region anyway, because that's what they're there for. And now the obedient, the loyal, the lapdogs of the West, SDSM, they cannot negotiate grants from the EU for the highways. They're planning with Bechtel. Construction hasn't started yet. They're doing this publicity stunts, like they're doing mining in Pelagonia, which is the only flat part of Macedonia which does not require any mining. But they're driving the ambassador around the country to show that they're doing something. So they would mine a stretch of the road to show that they're building something, and they were using this like colorful like smoke, so it's more visible for the press. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's not actual construction mining. But in the case of this highway that Gruevski got negotiated, so he would build with the Chinese. We pay for this, but the Chinese give us a soft loan, and then if we play our cards right, this first deal would lead then to a railway contract that the Chinese will build on their own dime, because it's strategically important for them. Then possibly into energy, hydro plants, even canals along Vardar that was the thinking. So Gruevski would play both the EU and the Chinese. And now we are, and the EU-funded highway was obviously built by a Greek company. So when you have it's understood that if you're taking the EU loans, then the contract goes to a EU company. But SDSM does not use this soft EU Chinese loans, does not use the EU grants, goes straight to the most expensive contractor, Bechtel, in the US State Department. At least if you hire them, you get some leverage in the State Department. But we're hiring them not through a Macedonian party, not through SDSM, which is still nominally a Macedonian party, but we're making the deal through DUI. So even this political foreign policy benefit for the country is actually actively harmful to the Macedonian cause, because first thing that DUI does with this money they're paying to the State Department, they have Blinken over, and then they have Jim O'Brien over, and then they send a message against VMRO, against Macedonian national interest, in support of Albanian national interest. So I'm paying taxes for an overpriced highway that probably will never get built, and in return I'm getting berated by idiot diplomats from the corrupt State Department.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I think this makes a good argument then to go back and revisit what we talked about earlier, for VMRO to have a strong candidate who's going to stand up to all of these people for the interests of Macedonia, first and foremost. And because I think at the end of the day, Cvetin, all of these people are cowards. I think Ali Ahmeti and Artan Grubi are cowards. I think the State Department people we've just talked about are cowards. And if somebody stands up to them, they will back down. I honestly believe that. Let's test the theory. They're cowards. I think Nick will approve that. So,
they're turncoats. If the Russians get to Odessa in a few months, they will be speaking Russian.
Yeah.
This is why this is how you became Muslim. The crux of the question.
Yeah.
They're a small nation surrounded by a lot more Slavs. Obviously, they're afraid, and their defense strategy is to adopt whoever is stronger in the world. So if it's the Ottomans, they changed religion. They dropped centuries of Christianity to adopt Islam because the Turks are stronger at the moment. The Russians come, they're the biggest communists in the world. They were even berating Russia that Russia is not communist enough, the Soviet Union. The US comes, they're the biggest Americans, bootlickers, everything. ISIS comes, they had the highest per capita for any European, and I think possibly even North African country, participation rate in ISIS when it looked for a while that the caliphate is being formed. So they're extremely fickle. You can just go through there is this map of Albanian first names, but it goes through history, right? And it changes from Christian to Islamic to now some kind of like Illyrian pagan names. They might easily adopt Russian names if the Wagner group comes to the region soon. So yeah, this is how they are.
Yeah. On that note, let me leave with, I found this quote the other day. I was reading this fantastic book about American involvement in the Middle East since 1776, so it's a 600-plus page book written by a former Israeli ambassador to the United States. But he had in the book, and it reminded me of a quote, and I posted it, and then somebody didn't like it, but from the late, great Samuel Huntington, Clash of Civilizations, quote, "The underlying problem for the West is not Islamic fundamentalism. It is Islam, a different civilization whose people are convinced of the superiority of their culture and are obsessed with the inferiority of their power." I firmly believe that.
Yeah, that's the big issue we have here. I mean, Bush was on the money with that question, but he can't be bothered. I mean, Republicans can't be bothered to do foreign policy under Trump or anything.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's a full wrap.
I have to make a correction. While we were talking, I said that VMRO won the first round of the presidential elections in 2020. Actually, they lost it. I Googled while we were talking. Actually, SDSM had a coalition with DUI, and they still had some support, some public support then. It was before the French veto and the Bulgarian veto, and everything went south. So they actually won by, Pendarovsky actually beat Siljanovska by 4,000 votes in the first round. But this was with the DUI unified behind them, and SDSM still looking like a normal party now.
Right.
No chance this will happen. Levica is running Siljanovska's actually very good friend, Biljana Vankovska, another left-wing political professor. They would jointly participate in the colored revolution in the protests against Gruevski, actually. So this is like Levica probably trying to split the patriotic votes. So if VMRO runs Siljanovska, Levica is running practically a mirror copy of Professor Siljanovska. So this will be interesting to see if this happens.
Yes. All right. Well, let's reconvene in 2 weeks, and we'll have a VMRO candidate by then, I think, and some of the other stuff will have shaken out. And this is episode 168 of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. Cvetin, it's been great talking to you.
You too, Betty. Take care.
You too.